Hi, good morning everyone, thank you for coming. I'll try not to send you all to sleep with this, but what I'd like to do is talk to you about intelligent invoice handling, as we call it, optimized invoice handling from arrival to archive. Now excuse me, I need to sit down for this, it's quite heavy going. So let me introduce you to the ABBYY group and what ABBYY do. As Joe rightly said, ABBYY are a Russian company founded in 1989. The core business technology at the time was dictionary and translation. The company actually started with a university student who found a need to convert Russian into English, and he developed his own technology to do that, which later grew into a product called Lingvo, which is still very, very popular to this day. On that technology and the popularity on the back of that technology, ABBYY grew, and ABBYY grew to work in many different fields of language recognition, and from that developed OCR and ICR, OCR being optical character recognition. And it's that technology that I will show you today. So who uses our software? Well, ABBYY you may not have heard of, but the likelihood is you will have heard or you will have used a piece of software that uses ABBYY technology. It's used in many different streams of business. Invoice capture is one of those fields, and that's what we're talking about today, but we're also used in banking, form and questionnaire capture, and also in just general document archive, or full page OCR as we call it, where you're capturing data from entire documents. So let's talk about invoices and the challenges of managing invoices. Paystream Advisors recently carried out a survey of accounts payable practitioners, and as you can see there are three fairly large spikes on this graph around the challenges. And those are, the top one being the highest, 52%, was the fact that invoices are received in paper format. And obviously paper format conversion to digital is a challenge. The second largest peak being manual data entry process. So having to have accounts clerks keying data from those paper invoices into a system. And then the third largest spike is the manual routing of invoices for approval. So having to physically move piles of paper from one desk to another for the approval process. And it's that which our ABBYY Invoice Reader product is designed to solve. It looks at each of those three spikes. So capturing the data from the from the paper invoices, converting it to digital media. That removes the need to have the manual data entry. You're no longer having people sat there keying. You're working on an exception basis. You're only dealing with queries. And of course, because the data is in an electronic format from there, routing that information throughout your business becomes a lot easier. You're not moving a physical copy of a piece of paper. You're moving the data, which means you can move it beyond the constraints of a single office. You can move it to multiple approvers at once. So why do we want to automate accounts payable? Well, we need to improve the transparency. We need to make the data available to more people. We want to improve our ability to report. Why do we want to do that? Well, we want to reduce costs. Every business knows that it's easier to reduce costs than it is to increase profit. We can improve cash flow and we can improve performance management because we have better data. We can make better use of early payment terms. We can reduce late payment fees. We're removing the manual process, so therefore we're removing the errors. By removing errors, we're improving the quality of the data that we're reporting. Because we're improving our quality of data, we're improving our relationships. And of course, the final point there is we're no longer having to store boxes and boxes of paper invoices. We're storing digital data. So let's look at a case study. It's very generic, but hopefully everyone will find something to take away from this. So we installed our product in a company with had just over 1,000 employees, and they were processing a little over 2,000 invoices a week. The core challenge there was 50% of the employee time within the accounts department was spent looking for data or looking for the physical invoice itself. And the time to process the invoice from receipt to approval to payment was just over 4 weeks. By using a scanning and automation solution and by working with the existing ERP system to create an approval workflow, we reduced that time by 50%. So we went from 4 weeks to 2 weeks. So not only were we saving time, we've improved data quality, and we've also improved the transparency of the data captured as well. So ABBYY is just one small part of the greater overall automated invoice processing process, or data stream if you like. We capture and extract the data. We read the page that's fed through a scanner, we extract the relevant information, and then we present that information to another system. In this case it could be the Formate product, for example. That data can then be routed, it can be reviewed, it can be approved, and then it can be archived. And what I'm going to do is show you a little bit around how that actually works. But beforehand, is there any questions on what I've shown you so far? Okay, good. So what we're looking at now is the actual software, ABBYY FlexiCapture for invoices. And the screen you're looking at now is our data capture portal. It's called a scanning station. It can be connected directly to a scanner sitting on a desk. You can use, if you have an MFP device, for example, you can scan into a folder, shared network folder. We can pick the data up from there. More interestingly, we can monitor email addresses. So if your suppliers are emailing you electronic PDF invoices, we can pick the data up from an email address and still extract the data as if it was a scanned paper image. So for the sake of the demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in a few invoices that I've prepared from a folder. So the documents are imported and then they're sent off for recognition and extraction. And what happens during recognition and extraction is the documents are classified. So we're looking at them and we're saying, okay, are they actually invoices, or is it a letter? Is it a mail shot? Is it another type of document? And for the invoices, we put them into a queue to be worked through. And of course, remember here that we're only looking at the exceptions. So you can see that from those 7 invoices that I sent in, the majority of those are valid, and we have one at the top which is showing rejected. Okay. You can also extract other data from that import at this point. So we've got a invoice total amount, and we can also see our supplier list here as well. Now the object of this, of course, is to take all of your invoices and make them all valid. And by valid, we're saying that they meet certain business rules. Well, which business rules? Well, obviously on an invoice there are certain pieces of information that you want to extract, core information if you like. Typically an invoice number, an invoice date, usually a supplier name, a business unit as we call it, or an addressee, and of course the amounts of the invoice. And the software has rules built around that, that the data extracted needs to meet in order for it to become a valid invoice. So you can see here that we've extracted net value, a tax amount, and also a tax rate. We can see that we've checked that it's a British invoice and it's in currency of British pounds. We've got an invoice number, we've got an invoice date. So the issue that we need to resolve in order to make this invoice valid, we can see at the top here that we've got a country field and the field does not meet the allowed values. Well, that can be very easily rectified. We can select that from a list. And that rule error there could be any one of those fields. It could be an invoice number was not found. It could be an invoice date was not present. It could be that a total could not be found. And that can be very, very easily fixed. When it comes to data that you want to validate, so for example, we may want to look at the addressee, we may want to look at our supplier information. What we're doing is we're looking at information that's present on the document and tying it back to your supplier database. So we're looking at a VAT registration number, we're looking at a postcode, we're looking at a name, and we're using that information to compare against the information that we have within our database. So you can see here that we found ABBYY UK Limited, we found the address, but because we've got this extra line in here, it's saying, well, I think I'm right, but I want you to confirm that for me. So we can select that, and now that rule error has cleared. And that red flag is a hard stop, if you like. It wouldn't allow the document to progress any further through the process, because it wanted that rule to be corrected. It wanted that error to be checked. Now we're left with an amber flag. Well, an amber flag is just a warning. It's well, I'd like this piece of information, but if you haven't got it, it's okay. We'll allow it to be processed. And this information here, we've extracted an IBAN number and a payment account number. And it's, in this case, it's just as an O, or 0 has been read as an O. So we can correct that very, very quickly. And that's it. So now we've got a screen of 7 valid invoices that can be sent for export. The next stage, as you can see here, it's saying, well, okay, you've made all the invoices valid, but we haven't checked that what we've recognised is correct. So, okay, what do we mean by that? Well, what it means is we can make sure that the information that's been extracted from those invoices is correct. So here, for example, we can check that the invoice number, all of the characters from an invoice number have been correctly recognised. And you can see down here the actual document. So you can check. It's what we call in-context validation. And you could work your way through all of the documents to make sure that the characters are recognised. To make it a little easier for you, uncertain characters or characters that have been recognised but the machine isn't certain that it's correct are highlighted for you. So rather than having to manually go through and check every single character, you can just go straight to the red ones. I won't bore you by going through all of them. So those documents will now be exported. And what we can do is we can export into multiple queues. So we can handle our exception invoices separately to our valid invoices. And why would we want to do that? Well, they may be exceptions for very good reasons. It may be that a supplier name is not present. It may be that a purchase order number wasn't present. It may be that a value is incorrect, that the purchase order was raised for £1,000, the invoice is for £1,500. So from that exception queue, we can then start to generate other documentation. So a letter back to the supplier. I'm sorry, we can't pay this invoice because of this reason. But obviously we want to treat those as quickly as possible. And this is where being able to automate the process is very, very important. By having another system watching these folders, picking up that information, and then routing that information intelligently is saving you time and is saving your employees effort in terms of what they're having to do and allowing them to focus on much more important tasks. So let's have a look at the valid invoices here. What have we done? Well, for all of the invoices that were valid, we've created an image, in this case a fully searchable PDF. And we've also created an XML document, and that document could link directly into an ERP system or an account system and start to update your ledgers. And in order to do that, you may want to have additional information. And I don't know whether you saw or not, but when I was going through that invoice, right at the very, very top, we were actually picking up an NI and an NL, sorry, a GL and an NL code directly from a database. And again, by coding the invoices at point of capture, you're saving time and effort because you don't have to have that document moved from one desk to another for someone to approve and to code those invoices. And that data can be sent, as I said, directly from the system straight into another system, i.e. an accounts package. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. So we've got any questions on Abby? Yep.
You said about exporting the GL codes. Can you make that conditional? Is that something you could have different GL codes, different detail lines on a supplier invoice?
Yes, you can, absolutely. In that demonstration, I looked those up against a supplier database.
Okay.
So within the system, we've got tables in the background that say for whichever, Barrow and Tompkins, for example, as one of our suppliers, the GL code would be 100, NL code 200. That could be manually entered at the point of verification, or it could be, as you said, by a particular item. At the moment, we're not capturing line level detail, we're capturing header detail. But further down the line, we will be able to capture line level, and at that point, we would be able to apply GL or NL codes directly at line level. Any other? Yeah.
Steve, when I know you I think you just mentioned about capturing data at header level. Obviously, at line level, certainly from my point of view, it's looking at PO numbers, weights for things like intrastat and that type of thing. To me, that would be quite a useful tool to be able to extract that information for a business. And certainly, one of the big challenges we've got is to be able to push data into our own system. We have a big problem about pulling out of the data is easy, but pushing it back in with the software you're using, it seems to be an obstacle with our current software provider. But certainly with being able to analyse invoice data quickly and easily by scanning it would be a fantastic opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, if you're capturing at line level, it opens up a lot of opportunity for you. You can start looking at doing three-way matching. So you can match your purchase order against your invoice against a goods received note, for example, and identify errors at line level. And when that becomes available in the first quarter of next year, I think that will be very, very powerful. What we've done as an intermediate at the moment is you're able to, if you have a database where you're raising POs within the system, we can capture a purchase order number from an invoice and go and grab that purchase order data and bring it back. So at point of export, we can provide you with all of the data that was present on the invoice and all of the data that's in your purchase order database. And at that point, you can start to build some rules around, okay, well, do the purchase order header detail match? So is the purchase order amount matched to the invoice amount? Is the purchase order number correct, etc.? So point taken that once we get to line level, it will become much, much more powerful. But there's already significant improvements over paper handling at the moment.
Does ABBYY sort of just use purely on invoice only, or what else can it pull in, if you like, in the way of data of the documents?
Obviously this demonstration was around invoices,
yeah,
but the technology can be used to capture information from any type of documentation, correspondence, goods received notes, contracts, agreements, anything like that, where the data that you want to extract is known, but the format may not necessarily be known, or the structure may not be known. That's one of the things that FlexiCapture is very, very useful for, is extracting data from unstructured documentation.
So you could use it to add to a marketing database effectively?
Yes, you could, absolutely, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, when you were doing the supplier validation, is that against the table within the ABBYY software, or can you look up on an ERP?
What the system does is it looks up against an ERP system and it caches that data into internal tables. So rather than run a query every time an invoice is extracted or matched against your ERP system, which obviously would open up a lot of transactions, what we do is we poll it once, cache the data, and then reference our internal tables. If a supplier data is not present, for example, you have an invoice that comes in that's not been set up in the system, what we can do is we can write back to that internal data set on a temporary basis, and then that will allow you to handle all of those exception invoices, and then it will also, at point of export, send a trigger to say, okay, these invoices are valid, however, the supplier needs to be set up in your supplier database. So I think there was a question.
The setup for invoices, is all of that pre-learned? So would you have to teach it, each invoice, or is the system intelligent enough to already know what an invoice looks like? So if you have 500 vendors, the chances are you'll only have to teach it one or two of the exceptions.
It's a very, very good question, actually. What I can do is I can show you a little bit around that. If I open up a prepared batch of invoices that I've got here, you can see I've got some of these are showing as rejected. And if I open up this one, for example, you can see that a lot of the fields have already been captured in terms of addresses, invoice numbers, etc. And that's done because in the background within the system, we've set up a number of keyword fields. So for example, for invoice number, we're looking for invoice number, invno, inv, and various other variations on that theme. So the system is clever enough to look for the terms that you would find on a typical invoice. However, it may not always necessarily get it right. So here, for example, you can see we've picked up the supplier name from an invoice, from a web address. And because of that, there's no space between the two words. You can see it's loaded as Creative Awards as one string of text. So what we can do is we can actually delete that field, find another field on the invoice that has a better explanation of the data that you want. In this case, Creative Awards Limited. And you can see that by selecting that, it's turned our vendor data green, so it's matched to the database. And then we can use this button up here to train that invoice. So the next time that this supplier is seen by the system, it will know to not look within the web address for the supplier name, but to look down here as the account name and find that information.
Roughly then, how long does it take to set up a supplier invoice mapping?
Most of the mapping works out of the box. So you're only working on an exception basis. And the amount of time will depend upon the number of fields you're having to correct. If you've got a fairly standard structured invoice, then it's a couple of moments. If I take another document, let's have a look at, let's do, I don't know, this one, for example. You could have a number of fields missing. If I wipe out, there we go. So this is now effectively a brand new invoice to the system. We've got no pre-extracted data on here. So working our way down through the list, what is it we want to find? Well, we want to find a business unit, okay? So we can lasso the business unit, and we can either select from our drop-down list and say, okay, we're naming our business unit here, or we can select the field we want to populate over here. So we can do that very, very quickly. Invoice number, okay? Invoice date. So it's very, very quick and easy where the data hasn't been extracted for whatever reason, because the format's not a typical invoice format, or the quality of the scan is such that the system wasn't able to find the key information, i.e. a VAT number or a postcode, and you need to fill that data in. It's very, very quick and easy to do so. Was there any other questions?
When you tie that to an ERP supplier account, does it remember the account details, or is it always doing a lookup on the name? I'm just thinking where an account name changes slightly, or you spelt it differently with a full stop, does it remember that linkage at a supplier's account level? It
will do, yes. And if we look at, I've got another example of that. If we open up, say, let's look at this one, for example. We've got a number of business units in here that are fairly similar. So, for example, we've got Extra Resource Limited. We've got Extra Resource Limited, known as Document Genetics. We've got Extra Resource Limited, but this time the street address is slightly different. So yes, all of those variations are recorded back. So next time an invoice comes in with that slight variation on, you're not having to manually correct it. That data is being held within those internal tables. So we're never writing back to your master data set. We're only writing back to our internal table and flagging it as a potential issue to you at point of export. Anything else?
Yeah, just
Yes.
one last one.
Sure.
What's the, one of the interfaces to an ERP system that you use, like XML and...
Typically, yes, XML, CSV, or we can write to any other ODBC data source. However, ABBYY is being a very developer-led system. At every stage of the process, there's the opportunity to interact with script, whether it be VB, Java, C#. So you can,
services.
exactly, yes. And we also have, the system is completely open via web service API as well. So not only can we write into an ERP system, your ERP system can connect into our service as well. Okay, I think that's just about my time slot over, so I'll hand back over to Joe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. That was. Thanks, Steve. Very
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you.
Steve's going to be around, so if people have got any more questions, grab that for a minute.
Have that back.
Oh, that's your phone, isn't it? Yeah, if people have got any more questions, I'm sure Steve will be happy to sort of run through with those with you. I think somebody raised a good point there. It isn't just for invoice processing, Abby. You know, you can do a whole bunch of other things with it as well. So, you know, that could be contracts coming back from customers. I don't know, it could be marketing forms, collecting information, and you want to feed that back into a process or a database. So, obviously, this was one solution today, but there's lots of other areas we can apply it to. Quick question, could everyone see the screen all right? Is it a bit small? Okay. I think what we'll do, we're going to have a break now, so we'll have a play with the resolution and try and make it a bit bigger. And maybe if everyone moves forward a little bit as well. Maybe that's the simple answer. I think we bought a new projector, which is a super widescreen projector, and of course the con of that is it makes everything a bit smaller. So we'll maybe see if we can improve that a little bit. So I think we're going to have a quick break now, and then we'll come back at 11 for Ed and InfoRouter, and I think you'll find that really interesting slot. So thanks very much, and we'll see you again at in about 20 minutes' time.